Chairs.
Michael, we're trying to figure out the operation of the PowerPoint.
Thanks, Chris. And we're recording.
These things lighting up yet?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
The way in
Okay, so wherever you guys want me to. Let's see there. Can you see over there? Jeremy.
Grab your chair and.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, you're right. So it's on the phone. I
didn't realize it. No.
So sit here.
Oh, maybe. You need to come.
Yes.
They're gonna be. Harry. Harry, go to the next one. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
So we'll do the bond update, and then I'll do that. Number 4. Let's see that one. Second, and you guys. Only the last.
The chair will sit here and have to do the last.
Yeah, you-
Okay.
it's our done.
We're gonna be. We'll have a discussion.
Here you go.
Yeah, I
Changing.
Sure.
Jody's gonna put it there. Hey,
Jason, Jody was gonna sit there too.
What's that?
Jody was gonna sit there.
Oh,
I'm sorry about that. I think she was on there. Right there.
Well, by the council.
Oh, yeah, because Min's is down right there. Because I'm like, no, we'll go to-
Bonnie.
Is that a no take the chair?
Yeah, the best spot.
Bonnie.
Little.
You know, spot.
Yeah, can we switch down a
Grab a
little?
chair.
Yes, please, thank you, I appreciate that. One more, another chair here. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Harry.
We got you down there. They have taken the seat.
Jeremy down here. Sorry, here.
And Jeremy.
Oh, you're not, oh, you're just. Jeremy, you're done.
Are you, with this setup, are you able to set up?
ready then?
Power.
You, Tracy. Harry.
Good. Big Tracy and Jeremy.
Harry.
Sorry.
No, that's right.
Big Tracy and Jeremy.
Oh, Harry's this.
And this all set.
You're right there.
Okay, well, we have the chair here. And a pattern.
Jody wants to.
It's open. It's open. Yeah, it's recording, so it's open.
Yeah. Sure.
So Bonnie and this setup. For the recording.
You'll be fine because there's nobody, we're not watching anybody on screen, it's recording the meeting. So you can
Okay.
pull your PowerPoint up and you'll be fine. People won't be able to see your PowerPoint. But.
Oh, okay, so I'll just click on this folder when it comes time. Sorry, I haven't done this.
No, it's okay. So you just go ahead and click on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, when the time comes, and then, what is the tag for PowerPoint? We try to get there, and we make a note.
Give the script.
I have a one that mentioned that we're gonna attach the PowerPoint to the packet, because more people won't be able to watch the PowerPoint.
Right.
We'll attach all documentation to the packet.
Okay.
After that. One time, you know,
After you start. Just give me a minute. Sorry. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, it's got my right here.
Okay.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna be right your way.
No, you're okay.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Just do it for sure.
You're looking into my brain.
Yeah, there it is.
All right, it's 4 o'clock. Let's get the Economic Development Committee meeting started, and I will give it to Michael for just a minute before I get the first item of business taken care of.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just, quick reminder that this building houses 3 branches of government. The legislative, which is the council, the executive, which is the administration, and the court, which is the judicial. And so while we were going through COVID, there was very little use of this facility to the point it was maxed out. Today is one of those days where court is holding jury trials, so they had the pools, the jury pools were utilizing most of the space in City Hall. And years ago, we used to hold meetings, Jeremy, and I think they probably remember that, maybe Tracy, we used to hold meetings in here anyways. But so this was not, as was alleged, subterfuge to keep the public uninformed. This was just simply the fact that there was a challenge in accommodating the court, which is our responsibility to do. Mr. Chair, that was what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Well, all right, we'll get cracking on the agenda here. The first item of business is the approval of the September 22nd, 2022. No, actually, 2022 minutes. All right. Those are approved. And so to City Manager Michael Mathias for the update on the bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have kind of a unique opportunity that's been building for a number of years to move forward, especially with public infrastructure projects associated with the marina redevelopment. And this has been a long time coming, a lot of discussion, a lot of trying to find what is the sweet spot relative to projects, costs, timeframes, approvals, all of those things. And so next June 1st, one of the agenda items the council will get tomorrow in the packet is city council approval, requesting city council approval for issuance of a bond of $26 million for Marina and Redondo redevelopment. And so just talk a little bit about the projects. There are 5 primary projects identified in the bond. One is LM&N dock replacement, which is, and you'll see the numbers when you see the agenda item, approximately $14 million. Development of the marina steps and plaza, which is $8 million. Continuation and completion of the Redondo fishing pier and restroom, approximately $3 million. We also we want to update and put in a much more effective and better and integrated parking system at Redondo and at the marina. And the integrated means that people who buy seasonal passes who are residents will be able to use them in either facility. And then finally, there's money designated in there for a decorative landscape flag triangle at the northern portion of the city as kind of a welcoming and gateway project for the marina. Couple of things about so the bond request is 25.1 for the projects, about 900,000 for bond costs. The city years ago was upgraded, and it's because of our financial discipline and solvency, received a very significant bond upgrade from Standard & Poor's to AA+. So our cost of money is one of the lowest that municipal entities would experience. And so we've been working with KeyBank Capital Markets, who are bond counsel and attorney. And so we will be bringing this back to council. The good news is the bond rating, the city of Des Moines currently uses about 7% of its bonding capacity. So the constraint on Des Moines is not the capacity to bond, the constraint on Des Moines is servicing the debt that comes with the bond. And so in your packet, you will see how that will be addressed. Just a couple of other points I want to make. In terms of public input, the really significant project is the Marina Steps and Plaza. And that we anticipate getting a lot of public input for that. There's a number of different designs, so forth, that could be looked at. That are really exciting in doing that. The other thing is that the city has received grants from other agencies. So we've received money from the state legislature for both the Marina Steps and for the fishing pier at Redondo, the restroom. We are able to utilize portions of the ARPA money to for the Marina Steps. We put a cap on the steps in terms of cost at $9 million and left $1 million for the plaza. And that's something we want to work with the community on establishing. What is it you want? How would that look? And all of that. But those other funding parameters have deadlines. And if we don't utilize the money in an appropriate amount of time, we will lose those funds. So this is the right moment to kind of pull the trigger on bonding and moving forward with the marina. And I'll take any questions, but certainly, Mr. Chair, we've had, we will have a very dynamic and no doubt extensive discussion with council next week at the council meeting. We wanted to apprise the Economic Development Committee in advance of what we're doing and recommending.
Good, thank you. I'm glad to hear that we're gonna have a lot of public input on the steps portion of it. So that's great. Colleagues that are part of the community committee, is there any comments or questions, or save those until the capital meeting on the first?
Did you mention how much the integrated Redondo Marina segment is slated for?
Well, it'll be in your agenda item for tomorrow, but
Sorry.
I can tell you. Yes, we have. So the let's see, Redondo restroom and pier is 5.8 million total. We received 980,000 from the state, utilizing a portion of REIT 2. Department of Commerce grant also, and then the debt proceeds will be about 3.6 million. And one thing I want to mention is a great question, because in terms of the uses of the funds relative to what I just described, there's also the sources. And the sources of the bond money do not in any way encumber or will be paid back by any money from the general fund. So no property tax will go into financing these bonds.
Yeah, so when you said that public input and some selections, were you, did I understand that there'll be a couple of different design features or designs for the steps and the plaza, and what we're looking for is feedback on what the public is interested in?
Well, but it was more formalized in terms of getting the input, so we'll have those designs available.
Right.
We'll have ongoing surveys, both electronically and in person, so people can identify the elements that they like. But one of the things that's part of this, and you'll hear more about next week, is so we're not recommending at this point to go forward at this time with the dry stack storage. So that means that the small boats bring in probably about $1.2 million over across the marina annually. And we don't want to give that up. And also the storage sheds make about 250,000. And the dry stack would take about 40,000 square feet. And we've always talked about the switchbacks kind of going to the south. Well, one of the design options, I think it's really cool. One of our staff, Andrew, actually came up with this, was what if we go into parcel A? If there's not going to be a hotel there, could we utilize a portion of parcel A for the switchbacks? Create more space in the south portion and have a more symmetrical approach to how this is done. We'd like input on that kind of thing. We'd like input on elements for what the plaza will look like, be a water feature for kids, will it be a gathering spot, all those different aspects. So we want to explore all those, but we want to have some designs available people can comment about.
Thank you.
What do you project? Is that all next winter, next spring?
Or
for the designs that availability of design.
Well, first of all, we'd like to see you guys approve the recommendation before we start spending money. You know, we're often accused of that, so we will
I know.
be sensitive. No, I think that the process is, you know, ideally, a council passes that on the first, bonds probably issued somewhere at the end of July, August. The $800,000 that you approved earlier were to get bid documents that could be paid for by the bond, but bid documents available for the beginning of the steps. So, and then there'd be a lot of permitting and some other aspects to it. So, you know, I think that's kind of what the timeline is. Does that answer your question?
I mean, 2023.
Oh, you mean completion?
No, just for the community input, I think that's gonna be one of the main questions that's gonna come out after that of this conversation is when is the community gonna be engaged? And so
Well,
maybe just for a season, when fall.
Right, so I don't wanna give out a number that we can't
Okay.
meet.
Yeah,
But I think it's important also to appreciate that a lot of what we have done has been based on previous community input. You know, and even the $300,000 that came from the state to look at 223rd, which is not a part of this at the moment, or who knows. But that's an ongoing and that's a long-term project. But even that had a lot of community input way back pre-COVID. So we want to build on that, although the bond proceeds would not go to pay for 223rd at this point.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's kind of a question of, you know, that's probably a question we could answer after you approve it. We can do timelines and let you know what that looks like.
okay, so it would be an ongoing agenda, give us updates.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, very good. I just want to remind everybody that the information that we just heard will be in tomorrow's packet for June 1st's council meeting. Our third item of business is the housing action plan half briefing, and also a reminder that the PowerPoint will be attached to the agenda for the Economic Development Committee when it's published tomorrow as well. I turn it over to staff for a briefing and a PowerPoint.
Do you want me to do that?
Well, let me just make, okay, thanks Denise, appreciate it. We have Wayne here too, and I think some of your colleagues. So the one thing about this is, you know, looking at this housing action plan is extremely complicated. And we talked about this, I think, at the council presentation. So this drills down a little bit. And some great information in this. But the thing to remember right now, the legislature just passed legislation really forcing our hand relative to zoning, housing development, types of housing development, densities, all of and the additional kind of requirements that come from utility infrastructure and all of that. So there's been that dynamic, and there's also been Vision 2050. And Vision 2050, coordinated by the PSRC, looks at kind of what are the housing requirements that they're putting on communities. And because of the light rail station right adjacent to our borders up near Highline, so we're considered a transit-oriented development municipality. And so we got, you know, we got more density, more units than we need, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think one of the things about the housing action plan we appreciate is, yeah, we got to meet targets, but we also want to retain locally as much control over what we're doing as possible. So there's a number of balls in the air here, and this is a significant one that'll be part of our comp plan update. So just a little background.
Great, thank you, Michael. Let's see. Try this one. So I know we briefed council earlier this month, and I just wanted to do a really quick recap on the framework for the housing action plan. I know in your agenda packet that we had sent out last week, the focus of our discussion is really to maybe answer some of your questions about some of the goals, policies, and actions that we've identified. But in general, the housing action plan included a housing needs assessment, we had a robust public engagement process, and out of that came some goals and strategies and actions that emerged from the input we received from the public. And I think this is a really good point to touch on, given Michael had just mentioned, we have growth targets that we need to accommodate as part of our upcoming comprehensive plan update that's due at the end of 2024. And so we need to accommodate 3,800 of the region's housing unit allocation. And so based on the need in our community, what our consultant was able to do was break out what that structure of housing need and how it would fall within the different income brackets that we talked about to council earlier this month. I don't know, and Wayne and Oscar, feel free to chime in on any of these. I'm just sort of, I know we went into quite a bit of depth at the council meeting on this. This is another really good graphic that sort of helps people understand when we talk about housing affordability, what some of the professions are where people who are living in our community are struggling to afford housing in Des Moines. And so you have everything from your dental assistant up to higher wage earners. And then with this, we really wanted to drill down into some of the goals, policies, and implementation strategies that came out of the housing action plan. I think one of the things that Michael brought up at the city council meeting was the fact that Des Moines doesn't directly produce or control housing. And so the things that we do control, our development regulations can facilitate the creation of housing and more affordable housing. And then the partnerships that we have with other entities like King County Housing Authority, South King County Housing and Homeless Partners, and others in our community to support housing need. And then there were 4 major goals and objectives that emerged out of our work, and 5 strategies that we've identified for consideration. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Wayne to go into a little bit more depth.
So as Michael and Denise kind of indicated, we're operating with a lot of kind of guiding organizations and principles. So as Michael indicated, there's the Puget Sound Regional Council, which has identified the city of Des Moines as a high capacity transit community, which means there's a bit of a higher allocation of the density that's allocated to King County that goes towards the city. But we're also operating under the City of Commerce, or excuse me, the Department of Commerce, under the legislature, which has recently passed legislation, as Michael indicated, regarding the change in resulting, changes. So we're trying to sort through all that, make sure that there's not, strains on infrastructure, and that the community that you all kind of move for a particular reason, it's a change in such a way that it's unrecognizable, that you can accommodate this growth. So these goals and implementation strategies were really the result of 2 inputs. First was the housing needs assessment, which was something that Oscar and Echo Northwest did, and they're a planning and economics firm that analyzes demographics, economics, in the state, as well as the public input. So really there was kind of 2 inputs, and that public input was varied. It included houses, it included a survey both in English and Spanish, and it included meetings with these nonprofit and stakeholder groups that Denise mentioned. And so the goals that emerged out of that, for the overall strategies, were to, 1, improve access to housing. Secondarily, to mitigate displacement. That was something we repeatedly heard. 3rd, to increase the supply of housing, essentially create more housing units. And you saw there we need to accommodate up to 1,500. And then to support the preservation and creation of affordable housing. Thank you. Next slide. And so, based on those four kind of buckets of goals, we identified a variety of strategies based on these inputs. Including the first strategy there to support and create partnerships, to create new partnerships to address housing. And you'll see there's overlap within these categories. So for that first strategy, you'll see kind of check marks that enhancing and creating new partnerships will serve to facilitate satisfying goal 1, goal 2, and goal 4. Many of these satisfy multiple goals. Secondarily, support the acquisition, preservation of income restricted rental housing by housing providers. And so I think, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago at the city council meeting, approximately 1/4 of the income restricted housing projects, the restrictions on those will expire here in the next 7-8 years. We have a list of those. So that's important not to necessarily lose those units from the inventory. Third, amend the development code to support various housing options. The timing of this obviously is intended to coincide with your impending update to the comprehensive plan here next year. Slide. Removing regulatory barriers to support the development of a variety of housing. Again, that's always been anticipated as part of the comprehensive plan amendment, but that has been amplified in the recent legislative session where the state legislature is basically from above said, thou shalt begin allowing duplexes and various new housing options throughout the city. There's obviously local controls, but there's been a kind of a policy directive from the legislature to open up zoning to some of these middle housing. And when I refer to middle housing, I'm talking about duplex, triplex, fourplex, not gigantic apartment complexes, but some of those smaller ones that you see in older areas of town.
And the new legislation has identified what those are. And so I think jurisdictions have to choose at least 6 of those to allow in their jurisdictions. And then there are some other parking and other requirements that they're looking for jurisdictions to either, depending on proximity to transit, maybe eliminate. So the state is, we expect next week that Commerce is going to have a comprehensive update in their newsletter, and they're all working on sort of facilitating cities being able to implement this. So even though the legislation just passed, we are already starting to think about how that's going to be factored into our comprehensive plan update as well.
If we have a question or 1 or 2 slides, do you want to just wait until the end?
Yeah, let's wait.
This is
All right.
closing.
Yeah, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
We go to the next slide.
and actually
This
the
is the last
next
slide. Yeah, there we go.
slide is just,
So
this is sort of where we're at in the timeline. We were required by the state to do a SEPA checklist and determination, which was issued on May 12th, and the comment period ends tomorrow. We've mostly received a couple of email inquiries, and it's mostly people saying, I need to find affordable housing, not so much on the housing action plan. So to the extent I've been able to, I've been referring those people to human resource agencies. Even got one from Des Moines, Iowa. So their human services department got an email from me. Anyway, and then we have the public hearing scheduled for the 1st of June, first reading, and then hopefully this will get adopted by June 8th. Did you want me to go back?
Well, specifically, what is going to be adopted? You have a public hearing of what so in our packet for the meeting tonight, we had the 2 what's the strategy with the goals, right? Let's see, part 3,
Yeah.
goals, objectives. So part 3 and part 4 were included in the packet. So what is it specifically that will be approving or considered?
So the full housing action plan, which your council packet will have, a full copy of the document. There's the health needs assessment,
Will
which,
be in it.
yeah, and so that's gonna be part one, I
Can I
think.
just be broad one? So it's roughly about a 120 or so page document
Okay,
that the first half of it or so is the housing action plan. And then there's a couple of things appended to it, housing needs assessment and the results of the public engagement. And this was the document that the city performed environmental review on, we should see on. The one that we give to you that will be in your council packet beginning tomorrow, it's only slightly different. There's no substantive changes. But for readability, we've taken a little bit of the text and changed those into graphics. So for some enhanced readability based on some internal kind of staff comments.
so none of the documentation that you provided for the presentation today is really up for discussion or amendment, because what's in there has already been subject to secret review, that's what you're saying?
Well,
No, the SEPA review is something that we are required to provide notice to outside agencies, interest groups, anybody who participated in the community outreach, open houses, surveys, receive notice. And so it's basically an opportunity for the public to review what we've developed. And then they can ask questions, get comment, provide
yeah,
comments.
but there's also an understanding and expectation by ecology and the state that there will be changes as a document like this wends its way through the adoption process. And that those changes, as long as they're not so significant that it's kind of unrecognizable, are okay. And so yes, you absolutely can amend this, and that won't run afoul of SEPA environmental review.
So at what point, so I did have several questions after reviewing it, and then also a couple of recommendations. Is this the place where you want to?
That would be great.
I don't know how much time you have, but. So in reviewing this chart here, so there it's two parts, but here it's in one part. It seemed to me, so in considering what we, moving forward, whatever code amendments come forward to us are probably going to be stimulated by this, directed,
Right.
It's a directive, right? So when we're considering those, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to consider strategy 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, I want to consider the strategies that cover the most ground, right? So you've got 2 strategies that, in my opinion, address every single goal. And those would be the 2 strategies that you'd say, I want to emphasize those as priorities when those come across to us, right? So a strategy number 4, for example, the last box is not checked, but really, if you say under goal number 4, creation of affordable housing, then remove regulatory barriers to support development of a variety of housing types really should have a check mark in there, because that strategy does help support the creation of affordable housing. Is that?
Yeah, I would concur.
So, and then the same thing with this, if you go down one more. What I'm trying to do is, I guess that's confusing. What I'm trying to do in my mind is create, how am I gonna make this decision in the future? You're gonna come to the table with recommendations, and I wanna say, well, strategy number 2 only checks 2 goals. So I'm like, but if strategy 4, okay, and 3, strategy 3 does the same thing. Amend the development code to support housing options. Well, I think that is in support of the creation of affordable housing. So in my mind, I checked 2 more boxes, but what that does is give me a picture of where when you bring these things forward. So if that's okay with you, unless anybody has any comments or questions on that.
I have one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think a couple of things, appreciate your, kind of the points you're making. Council members. So I think one of the things, 2 things are important. First of all, this is a framework, because ultimately it's private investment. And so if we can facilitate private investment, but I think one of the things to remember about affordable housing, not to say it is an exceedingly worthwhile goal and important, is when you say, for example, not you, but when it says, I think one slide down maybe. Reduce development costs for affordable housing. Okay, so if we reduce the cost for the investment for affordable housing, those costs will be borne elsewhere. And so, I guess the point I'm making is not all of the goals are equal relative to saying this meets 4 versus these 3. Maybe those 3 are really the critical. I mean, I guess if you need 4, you do everything, but do you know what I'm saying? The idea is that, mitigate displacement, great goal. Remove regulatory barriers to support the development of a variety of housing types and mitigate displacement. And I'm thinking about the situation that occurred with Delco when they built the, Waterview Crossing. And that was, it's a beautiful facility for affordable housing at a certain level. It displaced a ton of mobile homes.
Right.
And that was painful to watch, right? And so I guess I'm just saying that clear as this is, let's not make the mistake of thinking it's simple. Because, and I'm not saying you are, but
I spent a lot of time trying to understand the document. I did a lot. So this is what I'll do. I'll hone it down to about 4 statements. So the key for me was there are only 2 strategies that are affordable. So I think those should be priority. This is just my opinion. You guys can, I think it's a good opinion.
And this is great because when we have the public hearing, we can express what we heard at this committee. So then when the council of the whole is considering this, they can understand where different council members are coming from too.
Okay, and then these, along with anything regulatory, in my opinion, should be priority. So in that one list, when you talk the section, I think section 4 under implementation, part 4, you talked about all this implementation. So anything on that, it was an extended chart, very extensive chart. Anything to me that was regulatory, I felt like this timing is of the essence where it's perfect timing, right? We're updating our comp plan. So anything that's regulatory, stick it to the top. That's my opinion. And then also strategies 3, 4, and 5 address the entire range of income categories, which I appreciated as well. So you've got strategies that only address low income or up to middle income. So that's why I appreciated those 3 strategies. Then one more 2-part observation in regard to administration. Anything that was administrative, I would personally rather support staff with tech, reduce fees, incentivize building versus hiring more staff. You can get the job done with incentives in tech instead of hiring more, right? Because as soon as you hire another staff, you kind of offset savings or incentives. And then when I was in an extended presentation at SCIP last week, they talked about a couple of cities really loved. And I don't know anything about these, but mybuildingpermit.com. So talking about tech and living review. And the one thing about those is when you have consistency across jurisdictions, it's very helpful for developers and builders. They used to say that. And that was a really big message. That's all I had. I mean, I have more, but I'm not gonna be like, I don't know. Over this conversation.
We did go, I don't know if you're aware, we went to electronic plan review during COVID. So we did shift from paper form to COVID, and we are definitely always looking for ways to streamline the development review process. And I just learned today through a briefing from Commerce at the King County Planning Directors that there are going to be grant funds available to help jurisdictions streamline development review process. So that is something we'll hear more next month from them. And so once we hear that, we'll hopefully be applying for some of that funding.
Thank you.
I have one comment on that, is that, this is great. I'll look forward to more in the packet tomorrow. and more discussion on it first, but being one that has just been through plan review. On one, once I got it figured out, which. So once I got it figured out, it was great. On top of it, so.
It's definitely in terms of the amount of labor of not having to stamp 7 sets of plans and route them and then have 7 sets of plans come back to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it was a good process.
Mr. Chair, I think
Yes.
people can notice kind of what paper looks like.
Yeah,
Right.
and the amount of trees we're saving.
The other nice thing about, I mean, there, said about you being reviewed, I've been getting sets of comments back from different reviewers. They can have a consolidated, they're all kind of commenting on the same plan set, which.
And that's how ours is set up
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
which really helps.
Very good.
But thank you for your comments.
So I'll wait.
It's very good. Thanks for the presentation. Anything else from staff or consultants?
On this subject.
On this?
Yeah.
Oh, I did have, sorry,
That's
2 more recommendations under strategy 4, and I don't know, and I didn't see it I've heard these 2 recommendations around the region, but I didn't see it here. One was the consider condominiumization of ADUs. And for affordability and financing, so when you're allowing ADUs in town and you can't split the lot. But if you can LIs the unit, then you can finance it. And then,
It's full employment after the attorneys.
pardon?
It's full employment after the attorneys.
And the surveyors.
Yeah, just throwing it out there because it's a regional conversation and streamlined pre-approved ADU design. Was that in here?
Yeah, we mentioned at our meeting, that you'll find that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
That was it. I am.
Moving on to our 4th final item on the agenda tonight is the review of 5 minutes in downtown.
Great.
Zone C and C.
Right, so this is an item that we anticipate bringing back to council or to committee and council in a more comprehensive manner. And I think one of the things in the past, not all the time, but I think a critique you could make is that in the past, we've done this a little bit piecemeal. And so we want to try and not avoid that, we want a coherent approach. And so what we'd like to do, and Mr. Chair, we talked about this briefly, was bring back to the committee kind of a comprehensive look at especially Marine View and 7th and that whole area. And what marina redevelopment looks like for that. We're getting a lot of inquiries, really top-notch developers about private investment in the city and things that they could do in the downtown area. And that's exciting. So we plan on bringing that back to you. We want to do a little more research, but there is one parcel. I just wanted to try and get a read from the committee that about 4 years ago before COVID, the theater, there were 2 parcels which were not enumerated other than by their requirements. They'd be like at least two whatever parcels be a couple of 100 feet apart, and so forth. And the council at that time, a lot of leadership from Councilmember Pennington, which you deserve credit for because it potentially blocks some of his views. So doing the greater good, he supported this and it passed. And so what happened was the theater was extended a 10-foot entitlement. And the other one was Triggs property, the pit, as we fondly call it. And that was another 10-foot increase. And so the theater's gone forward and developed and utilized that space at that extra height. And Triggs property has not. And so eventually, after everything we could possibly do, extending that entitlement, it went away. And so that property is currently under review for purchase by a development group. And they're doing their due diligence. And one of the points that they're interested in is would council restore that 10-foot height increase? And so I, I want to be respectful of our public process, but also proprietary to the interest of a group that has not yet formalized their ownership. And so I wanted to ask council, and it's funny the way it worked, because Trig really missed the boat, is that he had an entitlement, he lost it, he's selling the property, and the entitlement could go back to the buyer. And so he missed out, but that was unfortunate because there was a lot of delay in that. So I just was wondering, if there's any kind of consensus from the committee as to whether you would entertain restoring that 10 feet to that area.
First.
I think the community would be incredibly disappointed if we let something that kind of interest slip through our fingers because of the 10-foot situation. So I am in full support of whatever would facilitate making that a beautiful space in our community. That's when I think that is like the number one is that lot right there. So I'm all in on that.
Yeah, what's great about it too is that, you go up 45 feet off the highest point of marine view on the property. So you've got the depth from before you get to marine view and then above that. And that's, now we get into council, the chair's expertise. The 5/2 and the wood frame and all of that, how that all works relative to what's feasible financially, but yeah, thank you. That's to me, that's good news.
Yeah, we did that before, we afforded that, so I think we can afford it this time.
I absolutely don't see a challenge with it. I agree with Deputy Mayor's comments that we gave it to them in the past that came in. And I think for the last 20 years, 20 plus years, that thing sat there. Like, yeah, those that have been in the city would rather have something. A concrete retaining wall and weeds to look at.
And we've also invested in infrastructure with PSC relative to that undergrounding the alleyway. There's where that old Lake Tavern was, is now mixed use development. It's so there's activity, and I think it's wise to take advantage. And Mr. Chair, one last comment. This goes back to the bond issue, but I would be remiss not to acknowledge the efforts of Jeff on our finance director on all the analysis involvement with that. And if things go bad, remember it was Jeff. So
Very good. Any idea when this would come to the full council and a timeline for the review?
they're doing due diligence right now. And so we will communicate to them the sense of the committee. It's not a done deal until council votes, but I take a very positive sense away from this, and we'll talk with them. And we've met with them extensively. They're in this region, so easily accessible.
Okay.
So probably, hopefully, I think they were trying to extend the due diligence. About a week ago, they were trying to go 60 days, so maybe they're at 50 now or something like that. So within that time frame, they would decide.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, that's the last item on our agenda here. Is there anything else from staff that we need for this evening? Council member? Mayor?
I do have a question. So the updates for the comp plan are due in 2024. So how long before you would be in forming some of these code amendments that would become, that would be directed by the housing plan?
Well, some of them, the comp plan amendment, the overall comp plan amendments and development regs review will be due by December 31st of 2024.
Oh, okay, not until December 2024.
Correct. But with the new state legislation, we have to have within 6 months following that, we have to have a number of the development regulations in place to facilitate, for example, House Bill 1110, which is the middle housing bill and the ADU bill. And so we are actually going to be doing a lot of coordination up front to be thinking about all of those bills while we're doing the comp plan update and how, because it all sort of ties together anyway.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody in this room, for being here. And Consultants. Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
What a whole heck of a lot of work. That's just the two part, I mean, I wish I would have. Down together.
You guys were your minute, so yeah. It is, yeah.